Hello everybody, I welcome you all in this new edition of news coverage and analysis from the Hindu newspaper dated 26th March 2019. So what all are we going to cover is detailed here in this slide. You can pause the video and note down if you wish. So let's start with the first article. It says activists protest auction of artifacts from Tipu's armory. Now let's read the news. The website of the auctioneer Anthony Cribs Limited lists the artifacts as Tipu Sultan's effect being the allocation received by Major Thomas Hart of the East India Company following the fall of the Seringapatam, we call it Srirangapatnam, on the 4th of the May 1799. The artifacts were taken by the British Army officer Major Thomas Hart of the British East India Company after the Tipu Sultan was defeated by the Duke of Wellington in the 4th Anglo-Mysore War. So whatever I am underlining is important for your prelims. Tipu Sultan lost his life in the 4th Anglo-Mysore War on May 4th, 1799. Tipu succeeded his father as a ruler of Mysore upon his father's death in 1782. He won important victories against the British in the Second Anglo-Mysore War and negotiated the 1784 Treaty of Mangalore with them after his father died from cancer in December 1782 during the Second Anglo-Mysore War. So these are some of the important facts related to Tipu Sultan. You should remember this. Question may be asked in the prelims. Now we move to the next article. The complete article is important. Whatever data is given in this article is important for you from your prelims as well as mains point of view. So I'm going to read out everything and then we would be discussing if required in between. So let's start. For the sheer number of first to its credit, PSLV C-45 EMISAT mission scheduled for an April 1 liftoff from Sriharikota will be a memorable one for the Indian Space Research Organization. Now this is called EMISAT mission PSLV C-45. For one, it will be ISRO's first attempt to placing payload in 3 different orbits. The chief payload, the 436 kg EMISAT, will be injected into a 749 km orbit. And after that, the 4th stage of the rocket will be maneuvered to a 504 kilometer orbit for releasing 28 international satellites. See the volume. Now once the job is over, the 4th stage will be restarted and guided to an altitude of 485 kilometers. So we have got 3 different orbits. First at 749 kilometers where EMISAT would be released, then it would come down to 504 kilometers where 28 international satellite would be released, and then it will go to 485 kilometers where some more experiments would be done. Now for the next 6 months, this stage will serve as the orbital platform for the space-based experiment. Altitude of 485 kilometers. Now the orbital, this is another first from the ISRO. Normally the spent stage simply becomes the space junk. Now you all must have noticed, I have been talking about this, that the 4th stage after its use usually gets discarded in the space and it becomes space debris. Now this time what is done, that this 4th stage is attached with a solar panel, so it would be live for next 6 months and it would be used as a platform for subsequent space experiment for the amateur and other enthusiasts. Now that is something unique. Now since this is PSLV, you all must be knowing that this is a 4-stage rocket system: solid, liquid, solid, liquid. So the 4th stage is a liquid system. Now in case of GSLV, you all must be aware that it's a 3-stage system in which we have solid, then liquid, and then cryogenic. So this one is a liquid stage, the 4th stage. Now further, the orbital platform will also sport a solar panel, I have told you, which too is the first of its sources said. But that's not all. the launch vehicle itself is a new variant designed PSLV-QL. For the first time, ISRO will be employing 4 large size XL size strap-on motor on the first stage. So first stage actually would be bigger so that it could give a higher thrust in the initial stage itself. Now again, the PSLV C-45 mission marks a milestone for ISRO's Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology IIST. One of the 3 experiments on board the orbital platform is the IIST's Advanced Retarding Potential Analyzer for Ionospheric Studies. This you should remember. This might be asked in your prelims, and it is anyway important for your mains. Now this is the first time that IIST payload is flying aboard an ISRO mission. The IIST director VK Dadwal said, ARIS will study the structure and composition of the ionosphere. So many important data here in this particular article. You should note down every bit that is written here. Now you must understand one important point, that the moment you increase the orbital radii, the size, it becomes more circular, and the more you reduce the altitude, it would become more elliptical. So it would be like this, then it would be like this, and then it would be like this. So the more you increase the radii, the more circular orbit it becomes. Or in case if you reduce the radii and try to make it circular, in that case the speed would increase. So the more elliptical, in that case, apogee and perigee you all know. So in that case, the speed at the far end would be less, and at the near end it is more. So in case you want a maneuverability, in that case you send the satellite in an elliptical high level of elliptical, I mean with higher eccentricity elliptical orbit, so that you can maneuver it more at the farthest point, or at the closest point, so that the slight change would bring in the large variation in the radii. Now the other 2 experiments payload aboard the orbital platform are the Automatic Identification System, or AIS, and ISRO payload for maritime satellite application, and the Automatic Packet Repeating System, APRS, meant to assist amateur radio operators. EMISAT, the chief payload of PSLV C-45, is meant for electromagnetic spectrum measurement. According to ISRO, it will release into orbit at 749 km. That I have already told you. The ISRO said C-45, which is set for liftoff from the second launch pad at Sriharikota, will mark the 47th flight of PSLV. Now there are 4 foreign co-passenger, I mean like small satellites, and all of them counts to the number of 28. As many as 28 small foreign co-passenger satellite will also travel to space with it, but to a lower orbit of 504 km. Now this includes 24 small satellites from US, among them 20 which are part of the previous Customer Planets Lab Earth Observation Constellation. The other 4 customers are from Lithuania, Spain and Switzerland. Now knowledgeable source said that 436 kg satellite, that is EMISAT, would serve as the country's roving device for the detecting and gathering electronic intelligence from enemy radar across the border, as it circles the globe roughly pole to pole every 90 minutes or so. So basically, if this is your Earth, then it would rotate like this. So this way it actually would be able to map your whole terrain, because the rotation speed is very high, and that is every 90 minutes. The other highly placed official confirmed that its payload comes from one or more laboratories of the Defense Research and Development Organization. For the 3rd successive PSLV mission, the ISRO plans to reuse the rocket's spent 4th stage as PS4 to host short experiments and this actually might be of great help in case India plans to establish its own space station, maybe 20-30 years down the line. If India plans to go for its own space station the way China has gone after America and Russia, or rather you should say after Russia's Mir and America and EU's collaborated international space station. You know that China also is in a process of launching. So in case India decides to go for its own space station, this kind of experiment would help India in achieving its goal, because then you can, what is an international space station? It is insulated environment which is self-sustaining. So in case you use the spent fourth stage and you attach a solar panel, then it can provide electricity. That is the chief requirement. And with electricity you can produce water also from environment, I mean the ice and all what is available here, and then you can run your system also. So the chief requirement is if it can sustain itself at that level and produce electricity for itself. That is one of the main requirement. Now the next article, Chinook will improve reaction capability, says IAF chief. This is one of the most potent and dangerous helicopter available in the world, most advanced you can say. The Indian Air Force on Monday inducted the first batch of 4 Chinook heavy lift helicopter, which will significantly improve the airlift on high altitude area. The induction of Chinook will be a game changer. This modern multi-mission capable heavy lift transport helicopter will enhance our heli lift capability across all type of terrain to the full effect, Air Chief Marshal B.S. Dhanova said in a ceremony at the Air Force Station at Chandigarh. The service ceiling of 20,000 feet would redefine heavy lift not just in operation but also for inter-valley transport and artillery. You must be aware that this is manufactured by Boeing Company of America. Now we move to the editorial. Another look at fiscal transfers. Now what author contends? Banks that do not recognize their problem will likely not resolve them. This is in the wake of RBI's decision to delay the implementation of Indian accounting standards. Now author feels that banking system are in shambles, banks are in shambles, they are hiding their loans, bad debts or bad assets. Now this system probably could have tightened the system and could have tried to bring these banks on the right track. This may be as per author, this probably is a bitter necessary pill for banking system. But by delaying this implementation of this system, RBI has given them a leverage. And what author is saying that if RBI keeps on doing this, banks are not going to improve. Giving banks time to self correct their errors would not work out. And that's what the author is saying, that bank that do not recognize their own problem will likely not resolve them. So by giving them time, it is not going to get resolved. You have to tighten up the system. You have to bring in mechanism which could tighten up the system, and that's the only solution. Let's see what's the story. For now, Indian banks burdened by sore loans will not have to admit the true size of their likely losses. On Friday, Reserve Bank of India postponed the implementation of the Indian accounting standards norm for banks indefinitely, citing the need for amendment to be made by the government to the relevant banking laws. The RBI had initially planned to implement the norms from April 1st, 2018 in order to bring Indian accounting standards in line with international standards, but center's delay in enacting the necessary amendments had given breathing space for banks for another year. Now, why center is delaying this amendment? No, because we need to understand one thing, that elections are just around the corner. The moment this standard is implemented, banks will have to recognize all the bad loans and bad assets, and then it will have to incorporate or include those bad loans or likely bad loans in their balance sheet. The moment you include and reduce your earnings, many of the banks would go in red, and that actually would give a very bad picture of, or rather would actually show the reality of Indian banking sector, which government cannot afford at this point of time, because then government will have to acknowledge that banking system or Indian economic system actually is in problem, and lots are needed to correct them. And that's why definitely government is not going to do anything at this point of time. Now, as far as RBI is concerned, that's what the author is saying, that RBI should have taken the step to, give this bitter tool to banks, bitter pills to the banks. But RBI actually abhorred that, and which actually was required on the part of RBI to go ahead. So let's see what else the author is saying. It is believed that the adoption of the accounting standard could cause significant credit loss to the bank, I have already told you, which will be forced to prematurely recognize losses on their loans and build up the necessary underlying capital requirement to overcome the impact of such losses. So the moment you incorporate all your bad loans, bad asset, bad debts, and also likelihood of the bad assets, your most of the banks would go into red, and that at least government cannot afford at this point of time. Now, what kind of discomfort this may cause? As per the author, under the proposed norm, financial institution like bank will have to calculate expected credit loss on their loans during each reporting period and make necessary adjustment to their profit and loss account even before a borrower may default on a certain loan. So government will have, I mean, like banks, after the implementation of this system, banks will have to preempt, banks will have to incorporate before actually the loans go into red. The moment banks your debtors started defaulting, you have given loan and first default happened, and you have to incorporate in your balance sheet, so the red signal would immediately be there. Now at this point of time, what actually banks do, they wait for 60 days, then they wait for 90 days, and then till actually it goes to, your asset goes to NCLT or other financial regulatory authorities. Till that point of time, banks do not recognize their bad asset. But after implementation of this system, banks will have to immediately first default, and banks will have to acknowledge it. So that way banks actually will be in problem. Now this is in contrast to the present accounting norms, wherein the banks incur credit losses in their books only after the outstanding loan have been in a state of default over a certain number of days, as stated in the rule laid down by RBI, that is 90 days, 60 days, 90 days. Now, to adjust with the new norms, bank will have to improve their ability to forecast the future credit loss. Now, this is the prime requirement of this system. Now, until this happens, banks' earning could experience volatility. Because banks will have to, so because after the implementation of this system, you cannot tomorrow come up and say that, okay, we could not actually foresee that this kind of default would happen, so we did not include. In that case, you would be penalized. So what would happen? Banks will have to take a precautionary measure and will have to put all kind of asset into your credit account, which is even slightest in the likelihood of becoming a defaulter. So that way it would increase the volatility. Now central government, which has been trying to bail out public sector banks without carrying out structural reform requires to clean up the balance sheet, might also prefer to delay the enactment of the legislation. That's because of the election actually. So what's the end note? For the new norms will cause more outstanding loan to be added to the huge existing pile of bad loans and cause further headache to the government. Now, according to the estimate made by Indian Rating and Research, public sector banks would have to make additional provision of over a trillion rupee if the norms are adopted right away. Now that is the reason why actually government would also not like to incorporate bring in any kind of amendment which RBI has proposed, because they have got more than 90,000 crores of bad debts. Now again adding a trillion rupee into red book would actually create a problem for the government. Now, the center may not be able to foot the bill and may instead prefer to help public sector banks to hide the true size of their bad loans. Now, this does not bode well for the health of the banking system, as the banks that do not recognize their problem might not solve them. So what the author is saying, that ideally the government should actually, the author also understand the dilemma of the government and its own compulsion. Government is somehow trying to bail out all these public sector banks which are into red, or which has lots of bad debts and bad assets. That's why author is not going too critical about it. All this, the tone is suggestive that ideally they should go. They're not saying that if government does not take this hard step, it would ruin the system, because it understand that government is trying to bail out banks. RBI is trying to get the picture straight, get the system straight. But then RBI also doesn't want to point the gun. It is asking government to do something. Government is not ready to do anything at this point of time. So in that situation, this article actually becomes a kind of suggestive one. It is not very deterministic. It is just a suggestive that you should understand that if you don't force banks to clean up their books, it would not clean up. But then for us, it is important perspective, because we can use this kind of system as advisory in case questions are asked related to cleaning up of the banking system. Now the next article, the point of having democracy. Now I have not covered the complete article, but one point that I wanted you all to understand, and this is very important, what Jawaharlal Nehru had said to Andre Melrox. Of all the leaders India has produced, it is Jawaharlal Nehru who has been the most clear-eyed on the goal of Indian democracy. When asked by the French writer Andre Melrox as to what he considered his biggest challenge, Nehru had replied, this is important, creating a just state by just means and creating a secular state in a religious country. Now that's the biggest challenge as per Nehru. And see, 70 years back, he was so true in the prediction. We could not find the just means, because European system or the developed countries actually try to capture all the resources. So just mean we could not achieve. So still whatever we could achieve may not be called as the just state, but actually we have done a commendable job. We have got a good earning middle class group, middle class and lower middle class group. We have got high class group. The only problem is that we have become unjust, because we have got a very large population in below poverty line, and that's where we fail. But then we need to understand that we could not achieve this just mean. Now the second aspect that he's talking about is that creating a secular state in a religious country. He actually realized that here we have a fault line. We want to create a secular state because that is the requirement, that is mandatory. We do not have any option. We have to be secular. In this country, such a big size, such a diverse nature, such a diverse culture, ethnicity, region, linguistic, every kind, and then we have got strongly attached religious system. People are strongly attached to their religious system. In that system, the only option that we have is a secular state in a religious country. So he was very right in his prediction about the challenges. So he was the one who actually identified the challenge that India has. The significance of this was that Nehru saw this goal as the challenges to overcome. Some years earlier, at the moment of ending the colonial rule, Nehru had stated that it was an opportunity to create a prosperous, democratic and progressive India. He had read the aspirations of his compatriot astutely. Prosperity was not considered second to progressive thinking. even if the later meant nationalism and secularism. Well, I'm not getting into the detail of the article, but I found this to be really touching and important. It's such a visionary thing that he had said, and we must understand and try to inculcate this while attempting not only in, I mean, I don't try to look like a preacher, but when you are writing your answers, let's just limit ourselves to the civil services mains examination. When you're writing an answer, your approach, your thought process should be this only: creating a just state by just means and creating a secular state in a religious country. If you could fully integrate this thought in your own thought process, you would be able to give a really thoughtful answer in each and every question that is asked. This is a, this should be a guiding principle to you. Now we move to the next article: paradigm shift in TB control. Well, ideally I should have skipped this article, but why I have taken this article. We as a country are facing lot many, you know this problems of spread of diseases. We have got flus, H1N1, H3N2, I mean Zika virus, swine flu, normal influenza. Then we have got monkey fever, uh, uh, West Nile fever, and then we have got TB. Lot many things are spreading, and every article that is coming up in the Hindu, at least, are suggesting the strengthening of the basic healthcare system. Government has proposed basic healthcare system and centers, but the kind of spending that is required there is not apt, and that's where we need to focus. So that's why I thought that we need to take this article, and then we should go into the suggestion that is given. So let's read the article. It says ending TB by 2025 is impossible, but sustaining its decline in the realm of reality. What is the bitter truth? Tuberculosis remains the biggest killer disease in India, outnumbering all other infectious disease put together. This despite our battle against it from 1962. When the National TB program was launched, all hope was pinned on mass BCG vaccination to prevent TB. In 1978, the expanded program on immunization began, giving BCG to all the babies soon after the birth and achieving more than 90% coverage. Yet, when evaluated in 1990, the NTP and EPI had not reduced India's TB burden. Why? Because you are controlling these people, but what about those who are affected? So they get affected, and by the time it is recognized or it is captured, these guys have spread the TB to others. So actually it becomes a vicious cycle. In 1993, the revised national TB programs was launched, offering free diagnosis and treatment for patients, rescuing them from the otherwise sure death. However, the treatment is not prevention. Prevention is essential for control, and this is applicable for all the disease that is spreading in India and which has become quite recurrent nowadays. So why a failure? Why did the NTP and the EPI fail? Visionary leaders had initiated the BCG vaccine clinical trial in 1964 in Chingalpet district, Tamil Nadu. Its final report, published in the Indian Journal of Medical Research in 1999, was that BCG did not protect against TB infection or adult pulmonary TB, the infectious form. BCG immunization does not prevent severe multi-organ TB disease in young and children and must be continued, but will not control TB. By 2014-15, the RNTCP was found to be very helpful in reducing mortality, but the failing to control TB. Why? From when a person becomes infectious to when he or she turns non-infectious by treatment, there is a gap of several weeks. And during this, the infection saturates contact in the vicinity. And now, delay in care seeking and diagnosis are the result of lack of universal primary health care. So this is the first barrier that we are having. Now what's to be done? TB control requires a slowing down of infection, progression and transmission. Pulmonary TB causes transmission resulting in infection which leads to progression as TB disease. Now, to transfer this vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle of TB control, spiraling down TB prevalence continuously, transmission, infection, and progression must be addressed simultaneously. Now, this part is important. This is the second part that is important. Transmission, infection, and progression must be addressed simultaneously. So, apart from having a basic healthcare or universal primary healthcare system, we need to have some way this inculcated in the masses. Now, the TB bacteria float in air, people inhale that air and get infected. The close one is to pulmonary TB person, the greater the possibility of catching the infection. Now, we must reduce chances of transmission by insisting that the TB affected should cover their mouth, nose while coughing and sneezing, and not to spit in open spaces. The only when the public at large practice cough and sneeze etiquette and they refrain from spitting in open, we can ensure that TB affected will also follow the suit. Now, this part is important. Just remember, this is quite a basic thing to say. I mean, for this you should not be writing an article, but then that's the common way of saying that for this suggestion you have written an article. No, but this is such an important aspect. You just take a look around and think about all the disease that is spreading, all the epidemic in India, be it swine flu, be it Zika, be it normal influenza, be it TB. Everything is actually related to normal etiquette, that is related to coughing and sneezing and spitting in public. If we could somehow teach this aspect to people in our country, we would be able to control it, because everything has got constraint. Now, this is something where you don't need to spend anything, you just need to teach, you just need to spread the message about it, and that is such an important aspect. So that's why I have taken this, because if we could somehow instill that etiquette in public, we would be able to control many health issues. Now, the next article is encouraging secret donation. What is the contention? The electoral bond scheme needs to recognize the complementary nature of the right to privacy and information. Despite massive campaign spending in India, there is barely any public scrutiny of such spending because of the opaque nature of the transaction. The electoral bond scheme amplifies such opacity by not disclosing the identity of the donor. What he is saying that you are not, both the parties, the one who has given the donation and the one who has received, individual who has given, individual or a society or a company who has given the donation, or the party which has received the donation, both have got right to deny the disclosure of the amount or who has given the amount. Now, the point is that author is saying that first thing, that this may lead to favoritism. Say a party X received a large amount of funding from a company A. Now, tomorrow this party X comes into power and that party A approaches this party for favor in getting its project passed. So there it can very well get a benefit. So this can actually start a backdoor favoritism, which should actually be stopped. And how can we stop that? When this information is made public. So tomorrow, say a party X gets funding from a company A, and if it is in public domain, be it whatever money, let it be 20,000, 50,000 crores. But if this is in public, tomorrow if that company gets favor or gets a project sanctioned, then public can very well correlate. So that way government would be made accountable. So let's see what author is saying. The government argues that the use of the bank route would likely reduce under the table cash transaction and promote transparency in electoral funding. Now, it said that transaction through banks would incentivize the use of white money, and the KYC requirement of banks would ensure paper trail. However, the term of the scheme appears to have disastrous consequences for political transparency. Now, under the scheme, both the purchaser of the bond and the political party receiving the money have a right to not disclosing the identity of the donor. Now, also, the policy dismantles several restrictions that checked illegal corporate spending or sponsoring previously. For example, by removing a cap on the corporate sponsorship, donations can now be made by any artificial juridical person. This means that even a foreign donation are now allowed. The requirement that a company has to be in existence for 3 years for it to make a political donation has also been removed. So now you can create a fake company and you somehow give that money, maybe a black money, and then that company can make a donation to the political party. So actually black money can be made white by this is one of the concern. Furthermore, this ignores all the concern regarding the use of shell company to siphon black money into the system. That's what I was saying. Further, how it is problematic. While the right to privacy in India safeguards the individual's autonomy and dignity, it is subject to the restriction on the basis of compelling public interest. Now, if the information pertains to matter which affects the life of other or is closely linked to a public person, it must be disclosed. And this part you should always remember, because recently this is the logic that government had, Supreme Court had actually given, or rather has mocked attorney of government when Rafale case was discussed, that right to privacy is not superior to right to information. So government secrecy clause cannot supersede right to information. So the logic was this only, that it is subject to restriction on the basis of compelling public interest. If the information pertains to a matter which affects the life of others or is closely linked to a public person, it must be disclosed. Article 28 of RTI. Now, the same logic can then be extended to the funding of the political parties, where the funders' action are bound to have an influence on the policy decision of the party. Now, if the party wins, a clear conflict of interest would likely arise if important policy decisions are taken that could affect the donor to the party. Let's imagine that an Indian company decides to make a huge political donation through the electoral bond scheme to the political party it donates to emerge victorious. Now, what if the government decides to provide favorable deal to the sector in question? The public will have no way knowing what guided such a biased action. This is what I started with. Now, this actually makes legitimize the favoritism, and that's what author also is contending. Now, let's quickly try to understand what is this electoral bond. An electoral bond is designed to be a bearer instrument like a promissory note. In effect, it will be similar to the bank note that is payable to the bearer on demand and free of interest. It can be purchased by any citizen of India or a body incorporated in India. So actually, like, it's DD, demand draft. You go, you buy, and it's yours. It's like cash. How do you use it? The bond will be issued in the multiple of 1,000, 10,000, 1 lakh and 10 lakh and 1 crore, and will be available at specified branches of State Bank of India. They can be bought by the donor with a KYC compliant account. Now, donor can donate the bond to their party of choice, which can then be cashed in via the party's verified account within 15 days. So you give this much and party can get it in cash within 15 days. Now, what are the other conditions? Every party that is registered under the section 29A of Representation of People Act 1951, 43 of 1951, and has secured at least 1% of the votes polled in the most recent Lok Sabha state election will be allotted a verified account by Election Commission of India. Electoral bond transaction can be made only via this account. Now try to understand why this rule. Now say minimum 1% has to be there. Now why this is required? Because you cannot, so that at least a fuzzy company or the frivolous company is not erected, party is not erected. Say now you, in case this clause is not there, you create a party XYZ party of India, and now you get the funding from 10 different people or companies. Now in that case, actually a person can get funded for fighting election or for his or her own use in the name of political party. So that's why this condition of minimum 1% of the vote is required, so that you are given verified account by Election Commission of India. So that way actually you are recognized as a legitimate political party. Otherwise it will become a tool to get the black money turned into white money. Now what is the next point? The bond will be available for purchase for a period of 10 days each in the beginning of every quarter, that is in January, April, July and October as specified by central government, and additional period of 30 days shall be specified by the central government in a year of Lok Sabha election. Now the electoral bond will not bear the name of the donor. So it's like basically it's a cash because it's a promissory note. In a sense, the donor and the party details will be available with the bank, but the political party might not be aware as who is the donor. So bank would definitely be aware. The intention is to ensure that all the donation made to a party will be accounted for in the balance sheet without exposing the donor's detail in the public. Now, will it be tax deductible? During the budget presentation of 2017, the finance minister had proposed that the maximum amount of cash donation that a political party can receive is capped at 2000 rupee, and that parties will be entitled to receive donation by check or digital mode in addition to electoral bond. So this is on basically on check and cash. Now in a press conference that followed, he had added that the donation would be tax deductible. A donor will get the deduction and the recipient or the political party will get tax exemption provided return are filed by the political party. So basically everything is favorable, but then the main point is very much there that it can promote favoritism. Now we move to the next article, balancing work. So what is the theme of the article? Basically this article is talking about the unfavorable condition that is there with women, especially those who actually go for motherhood. So motherhood actually is a problem in front of women who go for who want to pursue their career. So either you pursue your career or you pursue your motherhood. If you try to pursue both, you actually have got problem. How? That's what is explained here. We all are aware, but then it's good thing that we read it out, we study, so that it opens our mind, because lot many data are there that actually would open up our mind. The underlying gender bias in unpaid care work, that is motherhood. I mean, you are not working and you are not get paid to become a nanny. Unpaid care work means you are not a nanny. You become a babysitter, you become a nanny, actually you get paid for that. Unpaid is what? Motherhood. So underlying gender bias in unpaid care work is a critical factor contributing to gender inequality, says the International Labour Organization. The International Labour Organization's latest report, the ILO's 2017 global sample survey, established that 70% of the women were eager to be paid employment outside their home, but an ILO study last year found that only 45% of the women had the job. Now this underscores the gap between their desire and reality. The report, A Quantum Leap for Gender Equality for the Better Future of the Work for All, which was launched earlier this month, showed that the unpaid care work posed the biggest impediment to women's empowerment. How? Some 21.7% of the women of the working age are engaged in full-time caregiving without any pay. I mean, either they are mother or grandmother. Only 1.5% of the men fall in this category. I mean, you would not find men taking leave for childcare, which is quite rare. 1.5%. Maybe in the West, not. I don't see this happening in India at least. The impact of the unpaid work on women manifests itself at many levels. There is a motherhood penalty. This is what we have been talking about, which means that the mother in the workforce experience additional disadvantage compared to the women who are not mother. This is more acute for women with children in the age group of 0 to 5 years of age than among those with older children. Now, in addition, there is also the parenthood employment gap that unfairly privileged father. The ILO report an increase in both these groups in several countries that were surveyed. Now, more starkly, there is a wage penalty associated with the motherhood and opposed to a wage premium linked to fatherhood over an entire career span. Now, what is this wage premium and wage penalty? Now, say a woman is pregnant and due date is say 5 months after this current financial year. Now, most likely, if in case she is in the line of getting promoted, there is a more likelihood that she would not get promoted, because in the subconscious mind, in the system, or that at the upper echelon, everybody would be aware that in spite of getting the promotion, that female worker would not be coming to office for next say minimum 1.5 years. So what's the point in giving promotion or salary hike? So first is promotion, first is salary hike, and second is promotion. How? Say you gave 20% hike, which is actually which is what she deserves. Now if you have given 20% hike, that is the salary that she would keep on getting in her what? Child care leave. So that much is a burden on the organization without getting any return from that employee, because that employee, the female employee, is on leave. So what actually the system would do? The system would give minimum increment, or probably would ignore her increment, so that the company or the organization could save that much of money. So that is wage penalty. Now what is wage premium? Now since one person is not given who actually deserve that payment, it will go to somebody, and for that person it would be a wage premium. So say the number one employee is a female, number two is a male, she went for maternity or child care leave. So naturally she was neither given promotion nor the increment, desired increment or the due increment. So where did it go? It went to the male, and that is your wage premium. So you got something which actually you didn't deserve. Now this translates into a leadership penalty. Only about 25% women with young children are said to occupy managerial position. This contrasts with some 75% among fathers in comparable situation. Women makes up 69% of the youth who are not in employment, education or training. These numbers should explain why the bulk of the women drift into unpaid care activities. Among adults with university degree, 41.5% women are either unemployed or outside the labor force, compared to just 17.2% of the men. But who could break the barrier, go higher? Across the world, over 44% of the women managers hold an advanced degree as compared to 38.3% among the male counterpart. So what this point says, that in case somehow if a woman could manage that barrier and could rear a child and still could pursue her career, then the chances are that they would be doing better than their male counterpart. So this shows that actually motherhood and career doesn't go hand in hand in case of women, and they actually face tough time in pursuing their career in case they want to, and they invariably get into the unpaid penalty, or what you call unpaid care activities. Now one learning poll call, and we are learning the term psephology. Psephology is a branch of political science devoted to the study of elections and voting pattern. It is derived from the Greek word "psephos," which means pebbles. Ancient Greek used to vote by dropping pebbles into jar. Now Psephologists use historical voting data and exhaustive question in the opinion polls to understand trends in voting. In India, given complexity of such caste dynamics, religious formations, pressing local issues, which may be different from state to state, a huge population, shifting party alliances, and varying voter turnout, psephologists find it all the more challenging to capture the mood on the ground and analyze the final result. So we have got two part one to take away. First, what is psephology and what are the challenges at the ground level for psephologists. Now we move to the next article, that is IRDAI moved public disclosure norm, a public disclosure norm requiring all the general insurer, health insurer, specialist insurers, and reinsurers, including the branches of the foreign reinsurers, to share information in specified intervals about their financial performances is on the cards. So it is still on the card because this is not still a norm. It is a draft policy right now, which is actually issued by Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India, and it issued on Monday. Now, stating that one of the objectives of the norm was to ensure the safety of policy holders, the regulators said the International Association of Insurance Supervisors had recognized that the insurer had an equal, if not a greater responsibility towards the policyholder than their duty towards the investor. So that's why actually this actually would be giving the idea of the health of the organization from whom the person has taken a policy, a health policy or life insurance or whatever. So that's why it is important, because that constitute a major part of anybody's life or financial planning for their life or for their family. So it is important to actually monitor the financial health of the organizations or the company which are issuing either health insurance or the life insurance. Now, next important and quite interesting article, norms soon for regulatory sandbox for fintech sector. So we would understand what is this sandbox. The Reserve Bank of India will in the next 2 months release the guidelines for the creation of a regulatory sandbox. This is an important point that we would be trying to understand. For the fintech sector, RBI Governor Shashikanta Das said on Monday, a regulatory sandbox is a controlled mechanism within which the sector will be able to experiment with solution in the closely monitored ecosystem. So this is basically a simulator for fintech firms, so that the risk do not spread outside it and the reasons for failure can be analyzed. So basically it's a simulator. A regulatory sandbox would benefit fintech firm by way of reducing time to launch innovative product at a lower cost, said the Niti Aayog conference on the sector. Now let's try to understand what is this fintech sandbox. A fintech sandbox, or an application program interface or API sandbox, is an environment that innovators and the testers can use to mimic the characteristic exhibited by a product environment on a real-time basis to help simulate responses from all the system and application interface with. So basically it's saying that, say we take a bond that is issued by a bank. So it's a saving bond come health insurance come life insurance. Say a bank has come up with a unique idea of giving a saving bond with health and life insurance. Now how exactly is it going to perform with given all the conditions or all the facilities that it is giving? So it can actually simulate that with fintech sandbox. Now this enables the bankers and the fintech player to experiment with the innovative financial product or services within a well-defined space and duration. So what exactly would be, how many people are more likely to buy your product, how many claims could be made, how many would actually abandon the project, how many would be the defaulters, what exactly would be your return. So there are a lot many things that banks has to see before launching a product. Now till date this has been speculatory, or based on your experience, but there was no concrete simulating pattern. Now this system fintech sandbox actually would bridge that gap. So now actually you would have a simulator for that. So moreover, the presence of appropriate safeguard help in containing the consequences of failure. Essentially, the sandbox allows for a pilot testing of newly developed technology. Now, what is the need for a fintech sandbox? Raising sophistication of fintech solution is leading to increasing level of risk. I mean, like, people are now experimenting with lot many things. Now saving, healthcare, finance, equity shares, debt shares, different kind of bonds are not separate. People are experimenting with, banks are experimenting with each and everything, and then there's a cutthroat competition. So your good margins are very less. So in that situation, you need, because your risk has increased, so you need an environment to understand how exactly your yields are going to be. Now, in circumstances where it is unclear whether the new financial product or services complies with the existing banking standards, some financial institution may err on the side of caution, thereby hindering the innovation. Furthermore, every organization is trying to do a pilot with dozens of fintech, and managing the process is becoming very complex. Now, we believe that a fintech sandbox can help innovators overcome these challenges. A sandbox acts as a layer between a bank and their innovation initiative, and facilitate smooth collaboration between the fintech companies and the incumbents. Additionally, banks are relieved of the stress of dealing with multiple data requests, often the first step of to the solution development, as a sandbox serves as a ready reservoir of process related information. So since sandbox has got all information, you just need to, you know uh, give your planning, what is your product, and rest everything would be taken care of, because it would have sufficient data for simulation. Now, what is the benefit of fintech sandbox? It would help in piloting a product or business model through a sandbox, would actually help companies manage their regulatory risk during the testing periods itself. There is no restriction on transaction size, as the sandbox is a testing environment. A sandbox could also facilitate more partnership between the legacy and startup companies. So because of this, you don't need to go to the market to test your product. You can first test and then go to the market. Now, next news, Chandrayaan 2 will carry NASA's laser instrument. India's lunar mission Chandrayaan 2, scheduled to launch next month, will carry NASA's laser instrument that helps scientists to make precise measurement of the distance of the moon, according to the US Space Agency. NASA has confirmed the Chandrayaan 2 and Israeli lander Bereshit due to touchdown on April 11, and will each carry NASA's own laser retroreflector arrays. So this is all for today. Thank you very much.